Hi, welcome to Ageless. So in this video, I'm going to tell you my 3-step system of what I did to go from an insulin-dependent brittle diabetic to a person whose A1C is so low that I do not even qualify as pre-diabetic. And I lost 60 pounds, I got my vision back, healed PCOS, and I did this all with diet, mindset, and lifestyle, and a lot of learning. So let's get into it. So quick disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional, and everything I say on this channel is from my own personal experience and education. Nothing I say should be a substitute for medical advice. You should always talk to your doctor before doing anything different with your lifestyle in any way. So let's get into it. So at the time of recording this, I am 42, but at 27, I collapsed in my New York City apartment. Now I remember that day because a horrible Tom Green movie was on the TV and I heard it going in slow-mo in the background, like, ooh. And then I hit the wood floor and I lost consciousness. And my husband at the time called the paramedics, so I understand. And at the hospital in Brooklyn, I was given a shot. And the doctors would go on to explain to me and my husband that I was a diabetic, a very serious one, having come in with a blood sugar of about 418. And after spending some time in the hospital and learning I was diabetic, my life would never be the same. Now, my grandmother died of diabetes, and later the doctors would say it was likely the disease had skipped a generation, but they could not say how long I had been this bad. I had had symptoms for years, and now it had become a life-threatening situation. It certainly was. I was in no way at that time living like a person with diabetes. So what followed for the next year was constant doctor appointments, educational sessions, fasting, medicines, glucose testing around the clock, and insulin shots, of course. I did it all. I was literally a top-notch diabetic, but it was also literally a second job to keep up with all the diabetic demands. There was always some new way to test my sugar or deliver my insulin. Plus, every new symptom brought on by diabetes or medications brought on a new round of referrals, medications, and of course, more specialists, which meant more appointments. And it kind of felt like from the day I entered that Brooklyn hospital with a blood sugar of 418, that my life completely changed, and it changed quickly. And this was like my new normal. So how would I work, go to school, live a normal life with all these darn appointments and testing and shooting myself up with insulin? I mean, there were some times I had to do that in the bathroom. So for a full year, from the day I collapsed, I did it all. And I can say that I never missed an appointment, a glucose test, an insulin shot, or a medication. I really was a top-notch diabetic. But I did not get any better, sadly. See, I had needed glasses for a while to see before all this happened. And now I finally went and got them. So I went and got the glasses, but my vision kept getting worse. So I kept needing higher strength glasses. And as a diabetic, I could go in to see the doctor every 3 months instead of once a year. So I did, and always the vision was worse, and always I got an upgrade. Prior to the fall, I was thirsty constantly and urinated constantly. It had just become a way of life for me. My sleep was horrible because I would be up and down all night peeing. Walking around New York City where I lived when all this happened meant never straying away from a Starbucks bathroom. I mean, I had to be somewhere within that vicinity if I was going to be hanging out outdoors somewhere where there wasn't a bathroom. While this symptom had gone on before the diagnosis, it was still ongoing when I was getting all this treatment and medication. And it was actually getting worse now that I think of it. Even before my diagnosis and continuing through the first 2 years, my face would break out in hives, like red, swollen. I wish I still had my passport photo from the time. You could see someone whose face is like swollen out to here, all red. I look like, I don't know what I look like. The Stay Puft Marshmallow with a little bit of marker scribbled all over me. It was bad. And that was after one of these episodes. My menstrual cycle had stopped right before the diagnosis, a couple months before. And now that I was diabetic officially, I was also diagnosed with a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is linked to diabetes. Now, this continued after I began getting treatment. And as a young woman, to not have a menstrual cycle was devastating to my body. Not having a cycle at all affects every single part of your mind and body. It literally felt like I was PMSing every single day with extreme hunger and irritability and clumsiness and depression every day. I desperately just wanted the relief of my menstrual cycle arriving, and it never did for a long time. So finally I was put on progesterone to try to force a menstrual cycle. And this would work once a month, but it did not change how bad I felt the other 90% of the time. The polycystic ovarian syndrome caused me to gain over, are you ready for this? 50 pounds. And I gained that weight quickly. Then, in year 2 after the fall, the doctors declared me infertile because I was no longer ovulating. And I'll never forget the day my husband and I sat in a small Brooklyn OBGYN doctor's office and were told casually that I, a 28-year-old woman, could not produce children. So as I said, during this time, I gained over 50 pounds. I was constantly eating because the PMS type symptoms made me constantly hungry, and I did not want healthy food either. I felt disgusting in my skin, and I hated looking in the mirror. And even though I was diabetic, I constantly craved carbs. So also in year 2, and this was totally new, I began to wake up with tingling in my legs and feet, and my hands were constantly cold. And it felt like I was being tickled with knives. It was a horrible feeling, and you couldn't just go back to sleep and ignore it. There was no ignoring this. So I would stay awake for hours, kicking my legs, trying to get the sensation to stop. So I was put on more medications for nerve damage. And another 2 years after the collapse, I was sitting in a doctor's office, and the doctor was selling me on, I think it was some time-release insulin injector thingamajig, which I could wear around the clock. I think it went on either on your hip or on your arm, and I could wear it around the clock, and it would time release insulin into my body as needed, rather than me having to like sneak off somewhere and inject it into myself. And my mind began to wander. How did I get like this? I mean, in 2 years, I was a mess. I was on every medication. Probably a good 40 to 60% of my time was spent doing doctor educational appointments, specialists, all the testing, the fasting, the going in for the A1C tests. I was not healthy. All the symptoms I had before the fall were there with some new ones, and I was getting worse. It seemed like I was just sitting and seeing doctors who were just telling me that this was how it went, and I'd be lucky to not have my arms and legs amputated one day. It was not a very promising prognosis. So let's rewind. Okay, so what was I doing when this happened? I was drinking an excessive amount of wine and eating a lot of foods that measure high on what's called the Glycemic Index. For years, I was like this. Now, I want you to watch my video about the Glycemic Index, and I will break it down in this video also. But I do have a video that really gets in depth about this, the science behind it, and how it can be life-changing to follow this way of life. Now, further rewind. In my adolescence and my teenage years, I ate an obnoxious amount of sugar and processed foods every single day. I am sorry to say that I lived on McDonald's double cheeseburgers and blueberry flavored 7-Eleven coffee with 20 packs of sugar and a half cup of French vanilla creamer in each one. Seriously. I would sometimes drink 3 Starbucks white chocolate mochas in a day. I was clearly addicted to sugar for most of my life. By the time at 27 years old, I fell and was diagnosed with diabetes. And I had smoked cigarettes since I was 14. In my 20s, I was still smoking when all this happened. But now that I was living in New York City in my late 20s and I was married to an Italian man from Milan, I had just begun to learn a little bit about Mediterranean cuisine and different, more cultured ways of eating whole foods instead of fast food. Now, the doctors did feel that my grandmother being a diabetic, and by the way, she actually passed away from diabetes, complications due to diabetes. And the doctors felt that this was definitely related, and it probably was. But something was off in me, and I knew intuitively that I was doing something to cause my body to respond and send red alerts like this. So let me get into my steps to healing to where I am today. So step 1, maybe the most important, I began to learn, and I asked and found answers to the following fundamental questions about this disease. First, what is diabetes? Well, diabetes is a disease which affects how we turn food into energy. So usually food is converted into glucose, also known as sugar. The glucose then goes into your bloodstream. And when your blood sugar amount gets high enough, your pancreas will automatically produce the chemical insulin. And that is released to let your cells know to use that sugar in your bloodstream for energy. So how is sugar related to diabetes? Well, first, when you take in more calories than you burn, you put on weight. Everybody knows that, right? You take in more calories than you burn off in energy, the weight comes on. This increases your type 2 risk, okay? And then I found out something that is behind keto becoming a thing. To burn calories, your body first burns sugar, also known as carbs. It does that first. And then, only then, it moves to burning fat. So fat only starts to decrease on the body when there's not an abundance of sugar or carbs to burn first. That's why everyone's doing the no carb thing, the keto thing, so they can burn off the fat instead of the carbs. And that's also why athletes eat a lot of carbs, because they can afford to, eat them because they burn them off. So here's the biggie. What foods are most sugary? And this was life-changing for me to find out this. Carbs are high-starch foods, rice, bread, pasta, sweets. Carbohydrates are high on the glycemic index that I mentioned before. And foods that are high on the glycemic index are there because they break down to a lot of sugar quickly in your body. So as a summary, sugar equals glucose equals carbs equals high glycemic food. Also, a little known fact that needs more awareness. The spike that happens when a diabetic consumes a high sugar meal or drink can lead to actual mental dysfunction. Drinking can lead to an intoxication beyond what the normal person experiences. And this is because the brain and body of a diabetic cannot process the amount of sugar being flooded in when you drink high sugary things such as beer, which is full of yeast, or wine, which is full of high sugar and carbs. One of the risks of diabetes is also low blood sugar. And low blood sugar from not eating can also mimic intoxication. But of course, if you drink on top of that, it can make it so much worse because of that spike. Can diabetes be reversed? Yes, it can go into remission, but it is technically never cured. I would come to find that as I went on and off the positive lifestyle wagon through the years, your blood sugar must be normal for 3 months without the help of glucose lowering medications to be considered in remission. So what did I do next? All right, so I learned all of that, and naturally I put a lot of that knowledge into action. So here's the action steps that I took. This would be step 2. I had to stop drinking and smoking. We'll just put that right in there with it because that's an obvious. Only 1 drink of vodka a day maximum was going to be safe for me as a diabetic, so quitting was really where I needed to be. Fully quitting took a while. I noticed when I would go months without drinking, my overall health would get better. And that was just stopping drinking wine. So the next thing I did was I had to start eating according to the glycemic index. I learned the scale, which is in the description. I remembered bread, pasta, rice, and sweets were high. Bagels, super high. Baguettes, like those white hard bread things you get like at Starbucks where they press them, super high. Fruit, moderate. It's a natural sugar. But everything on this scale is a numbers game. And all fruit, of course, is not the same. I learned that if I had just eaten some pineapple, which is super sweet, I should probably go with an apple next rather than a mango, which is also super sweet. Kind of balances it out, right? So I learned I could have a little pasta, but don't follow with white bread because bread and pasta are both super high, right? I learned that eating a diabetic diet really was a numbers game. And once I learned these glycemic numbers, I ordered at restaurants and shopped and cooked in a very balanced way. It took time, but then it just started coming like clockwork. You would just know, okay, I want a little bit of potatoes, which are high on the glycemic scale, not the highest, but high. So I'm going to have a salad with that rather than, some pasta on the side. Just things like that. Very, very much your brain starts to just get used to substitutions and how to make it where you always kind of stay in a moderate range rather than you're up there in that super high range. Over time, I began to crave carbs less because I loved how I felt without my body. I cut out sugary sweets altogether. And if I was really, really jonesing for something sweet, I would go with natural sugar, like fruit. Wheat bread, by the way, has a glycemic score of 71, whereas any white bread is 100. Watermelon is 80, and I will definitely satisfy any carb or refined sugar craving with watermelon any day. And when you start to learn these numbers, again, shopping and eating is so much easier. Oh, one more trick, I carry with me all the time. Peanuts serve as a substitution for unhealthy starchy carbs. If you are really craving bread or pasta or a donut, throw a few peanuts in your mouth and it satisfies the craving. So much later, I'd come to explore sugar substitutes, and I have a great video on sugar substitutes where I fully break down all of the popular natural sugar substitutes and where they're at on the glycemic scale and how they range as far as the health benefits. And I uncover the ones that rank 0 on the glycemic index. So the next step I took was, as a bonus, I familiarized with myself with what's called the ORAC scale. And that is the scale of antioxidants. It measures the antioxidant content of foods. And I also familiarized myself with superfoods. So antioxidants and superfoods are the opposite of high glycemic food. Whereas high glycemic foods hurt the body, high antioxidants and superfoods actually protect the body. And these are nature's protectors against what might harm us in the environment and what we put on and in our bodies. So I learned blueberries, pomegranate, avocado, acai berry, all were super high antioxidant foods. And I learned about the antioxidants in green leafy vegetables, colorful peppers, and spices. I learned the healing benefits of these foods, especially when they are eaten raw. And soon I was eating for how I wanted to feel. And I was eating to have amazing energy and mental clarity instead of because I had a craving. Now you might think, Lindsay, that does not sound like living. How boring. Well, to be clear, I still sometimes eat things that have carbs or are not super healthy. In the end, it is all about that balance. Plus, your brain begins to associate certain foods with feeling great and other foods with not feeling great. So ultimately, you start craving the feel great foods. It just happens naturally over time. One more thing, I never drink soda, but I'll tell you that was not hard because I did not grow up drinking soda. I probably have sipped on a Pepsi 3 times in my life. It was just something I never. Now let's get to the last part, which may seem easy, but does take a little time, and that has to do with mindset. Best advice, do not start wearing your diabetes diagnosis like a badge of honor to be compared with others. I cannot tell you how many people I met in doctor's office or in educational classes that really liked to compare and contrast not just their diabetes, but the symptoms. Like, no, my left toe is almost ready to be amputated. Education is key, but in my opinion, being diabetic is not your identity. It's a real thing, but it's also a thing many, like myself, have beat, and you can too. The first few weeks of ditching the sugar and incorporating the high ORAC foods is weird, meaning the high antioxidant foods. It can be weird, but it's also exciting all at once, and it is so worth it if you challenge yourself and you stick to it for a few weeks. Believe it. See the future you. So, in summary, I did no alcohol, or if you choose, you can do a little vodka here and there. I cut out glycemic foods, aka high starch carbs and sweets, and I added in high antioxidant foods. Now, for me, that with the right mindset has been life-changing. And it changed how I felt, it changed how I looked, and it changed my A1C and sugar levels to not even qualifying as pre-diabetic. And keep in mind, in the end, this isn't about completely getting rid of everything and completely replacing it with all of the greatest foods on the planet Earth. It's about balance. When you really get to know that scale that I've linked down in the description, the glycemic index, you'll really know how to kind of decide what foods are going to affect you, how, and how to kind of live a balanced life to always kind of keep it right there moderately. So here are the results. Well, first, the weight started to just fall off. I felt really light and sexy and just good in my skin. And I have mental clarity and energy, and I sleep well. And I have been addicted to that beauty buzz from the way I was eating from probably about the 3rd or 4th week after I started. My vision came back completely. I do not wear glasses at all now. My menstrual cycle returned and a little later than that. My menstrual cycle returned a little later than that. And today I am the proud mother of beautiful 11-year-old twins. Take that, doctor who said I was infertile. In the end, I lost a ton of weight and I kept it off. My skin got so much better. The bright red hives never returned after I stopped drinking and changed my diet. The tingling in my legs and feet got better because my circulation improved. Nerve damage, unfortunately, due to undiagnosed diabetes and the damage that causes can be permanent, but it has improved, and that's without any medications. And as a matter of fact, I am on no medication and no insulin any longer. My last doctor appointment was about 3 months ago from today, and I still do not qualify as even pre-diabetic after all these years. My A1C is below 5.7. No more A1C tests every few months either. I honestly only need to go to a doctor if it's for something specific. I don't test. I do not need to because now I know the glycemic scale so well that I know what is bad news to eat, and it's a numbers game, so I have to balance. and balance of the numbers has become my lifestyle. We associate pleasure with alcohol and high sugar foods. That's our thing, right? We think it's pleasurable to drink. It's pleasurable to eat these like bad foods. I'm cheating on my diet. But once you break that mindset, you become free to take things to the next level, literally. The energy, mental clarity, skin health, and weight loss that I have achieved has been a huge bonus. In addition to healing my diabetes, I feel healthier now than I did when I was undiagnosed or insulin dependent. That is just 100% true. And unfortunately, thousands of people are diagnosed with diabetes every year, and they are led down the path I was. Meds, insulin, nonstop testing, doctor appointments, yet they often get worse because nothing else changes in their life. So it all starts with learning. I urge you to rewatch this video and check the description for the sources that I used, helpful websites and related video links, as well as the official Glycemic Index and the ORAC scale. So I would urge you to study these scales and use them to master the numbers game and achieve that balance, in addition to cutting out that alcohol, smoking, and of course soda. You will absolutely love the way you feel to your health. And if you like this content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's new as of recording this, and I appreciate anyone and everyone who has watched this and gotten any benefit out of it. Thank you.